Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth and Logos means a study or science. Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Most of you were asking me that why we should call Indian ancient history as Sattology, not mythology. Let me tell you one simple reason that Ramayana and Mahabharata are internationally researched books, but most of the Western history is not that researched, and therefore you cannot call it a mythology because it has been gradually getting proved day by day, including Western authors. So keep an open mind. So without delay, I would like to welcome my very good friend Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Abhijit, welcome to the show. Abhijit, what happened to Quad and what happened to AUKUS? It seems that AUKUS has become POCUS and it has eaten the Quad. What do you have to say on that?
Look, I've been telling you for a long time, Quad ain't going anywhere. Well, at least no institution with India in it goes anywhere. The non-aligned movement, nobody's heard of it in years. I mean, when was the last time they even had a summit? I haven't heard of the non-aligned movement in the last 4-5 years at all. BRICS, they just keep having summits. They don't actually do anything. RIC, Russia and China, again, they don't do anything. Shanghai Cooperation Organization, again, they don't do anything. SARC is dead. We haven't had a meeting in the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, God knows how long. You want to sink an international grouping, add India in it. It's the surest way to ensure that it fails. So they tried Quad and look where Quad went. Nowhere. Yay.
Quad has become squad now. I don't know what is the first part is silent. S is silent, squad.
Yeah. So AUKUS is basically what? It's I think it's America's way of kicking India out without actually formally kicking it out. You'll see soon AUKUS will become AUKUS with a J added, or JOCUS. JOCUS. That's JOCUS. With Japan added to it, because Japan's quite serious about these things, unlike India. So yes, you're going to have basically you're going to have the serious countries, right? If countries aren't serious about certain things, somebody can persist for 15, 20 years, and after that they just give up and say, yabu, that's it, move on.
Yeah, AUKUS is more of a military alliance. And see, the thing is, the whole purpose of Quad was to fight with Chinese hegemony. Now, if you do not want to do that without military coerciveness, then it doesn't make sense. Is that the main reason?
Well, look, Quad was always meant to be a military alliance. It was just meant to cover up the military nature through doing useless other stuff so that they can claim that it isn't a military alliance. Right? So it is what it is. Its time has come and its time is gone. End of story.
Now, the AUKUS is mostly driven by the ex-British colonies, Australia, UK, and US. Japan is not a military colony. Now, when we talk about AUKUS,
technically it was under American occupation, which was a British colony. So it's a once removed British colony.
Yeah, good point. Now, do you think the French kind of FAUKUS can also come in?
AUKUS.
Or something like that?
No. Look, the French don't do alliances. Okay. They just don't. You'll see that except where in the Francafrique, where they have critical interests in Africa, especially uranium and things, where they will launch a military intervention. Other than that, they seldom do the kind of stuff that the Anglophone likes to do. They've got a very different worldview. So I'm not even sure what the benefits of that would be. Now, personally, I could see a lot of benefits. When AUKUS was formed, we should have gone and, allowed the French to cry on our shoulders and said, don't worry, we'll buy your nuclear submarines if you transfer us all the technology. We would have jumped at it. If you had made it a 50-year program, well, not a 50-year program, but say a 30-year program, even spending about 70, 80, even $100 billion over a 30-year program is what, $3 billion a year on nuclear submarines. You would have had a very robust program going. You didn't. You decided to settle for, second or third rate Russian technology. Best of luck to you. Congrats. Yay. India, always unreliable. So it doesn't matter. See, the problem is it doesn't matter if it's the French, the Germans, the Japanese, or whatever. This weak link in the chain is always India.
Now, if you say French is ruled out, AUKUS is in, Quad is out, and now the only thing remain is RUCKUS, Russian-led an alliance.
So, well, Russia might be at war with America soon. No? Not at war. NATO isn't going to do squat to actually defend Ukraine. The point is, I doubt the Russians will invade Ukraine, but if the Russians do invade Ukraine, what's going to happen? I think their entire idea is to keep Ukraine in a perpetual state of tension, not knowing what is going to happen. And basically make the government unpopular. Because if you look, Petro Poroshenko is back in Kiev and he's leading his own little uprising, for want of a better word, against the current president, Volodymyr Zelensky. So what you're going to see is probably like what you saw in Georgia, where a viciously anti-Russian president, they didn't have to get rid of him. He just was removed, and then there's a generally more pliable to Russia kind of government out there, which does not want to join NATO. That's pretty much what they'll try to do in Ukraine as well. That's what I suspect. Now, what happens is, if something happens, the only thing America and NATO can do is impose sanctions. As it is, Germany isn't allowing any flights to Ukraine, any military flights to Ukraine to bypass German territory. They're forcing it to divert over Poland or places like that. Sweden also doesn't want to give them overflight. So even there, Sweden's not NATO, but anyway, Germany is NATO. And the Germans aren't willing to take on the Russians. The French aren't willing to take on the Russians. I suspect if it comes to it, neither will the Italians or the Spaniards. So you'll be left with what? Belgium, Denmark, Holland, Poland, Britain. Yay, congrats. How are you going to get any aircraft carriers into the Black Sea? You can't, because as per the treaty signed after the First World War, there are no aircraft carriers allowed inside the Black Sea. It's that simple. So it's just one of those things where economic sanctions would come and the world would just have to suck it up.
So do you think, okay, and the last one is MUK, Middle Eastern, any kind of Middle Eastern alliance. Do you think that exists or no?
Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, very strong alliance. If the things I'm seeing, originally when all of us used to be in DC, we used to meet very quietly. We never take photos when the Saudis and the Israelis and the Indians, we were all having dinner together. Now they're sharing their pictures on my Facebook, on my Twitter timeline, and I'm like, now don't pretend this is all new. I've seen this happen over the last 7-8 years now. You've been talking for a long time, but it's fun watching it all happen. But they've grown really close, the kind of intelligence cooperation. All my Israeli friends, not all, but a substantial portion of them, have shifted to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, setting out their businesses and houses out there, creating defense technology incubators in the UAE. And Israel has just given them free rein to do whatever they want in UAE. They've now got a visa-free. Can you imagine an Arab country and Israel having complete visa-free travel between each other? And from what I'm hearing from my friends in Israel, when Emiratis come, especially if they dress up properly like Emiratis, they're given the royal treatment because The Israelis don't know who's a sheikh and who's not a sheikh, so they think everybody's loaded. So anytime they go into a restaurant or a shop, they're convinced they're going to buy half the shops. They're like, yes, sir, please come in, sir. And if a Palestinian comes in at the same time, they're like, yeah, sure, get lost, get out, kind of thing. It can be quite bad. I've been to certain places in Israel where if they heard you speak Arabic, they'd be like, oh, what are you doing here, kind of thing. But here with the Emiratis, it's like they can even go up to this friend of mine. He went up to this part in overlooking the Syrian border up in the Golan. And all the locals were like, oh, welcome, sir. So kind of you, sir. Can we get you coffee, sir? This, that. And there's one major love affair going on out there, which I'm very happy about personally, I can tell you. I'm not very happy for my friends in Tehran because, they're lovely people. They've been victimized by their own government. But anyway, I'm generally happy when people get along.
No, that's a good reason to be happy because that's when there is a peace and happiness, there can be prosperity. Otherwise, not. Now, coming to the very usual, the American Congress people trying to create further problems between Israel and Palestinians, and where they always prop up the Palestinians to fight with Israel. And also, there is a lobby now in the American congressmen which wants to go against India also. What do you have to say? That they are again coming as a spoilers for peace and happiness? Would you like to categorize that like that?
Look, I think it's generally been very evenly balanced, much more pro-Israel as a rule in the US Congress. It's only since this, the squad, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and AOC came, that and even that Ayanna Pressley and AOC vacillate. They need Jewish money and Jewish votes and Jewish support. So even they, tend to downplay their anti-Israel attitude. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, of course, wear it as badges of honor. The more anti-Semitic you get, the more votes they seem to end up with. So, but then, I don't think anybody takes any four of these guys seriously. They're more like flashes in the pan. They're going to be like, those what were those bands called? One Song Wonders or something like that. So that's what they're going to be. But what worries me more is the fact that so many, as an Indian, that so many of the Jewish organizations like the American Jewish Council and things, they are turning against India. Okay. The ones in Massachusetts and New York have passed several anti-India resolutions and things like that. Now, I don't know what business it is of American Jews or the American Jewish Council, but they have. So maybe that's something for India to be worried about. But in terms of Palestine, Israel, there's nothing to be worried about. The Palestinians, unfortunately for them, because of their own bad leadership choices, are now completely neutralized.
The open support to many terrorist organizations by the US sitting Congress reps has ruffled many feathers all over the world, including Americans are also not happy about it. Majority of Americans, Americans.
Well, I don't know about a majority. I don't think a majority of Americans even know that people like Linda Sarsour and CIR are classified as terrorist organizations in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and places like that. They're actually classified as terrorists. If Linda Sarsour landed up in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, she would be thrown one-way ticket to jail, no coming out for the next 25, 30 years. Right? Or Riyadh. But, it is what it is. I think one of the things that irritates me about America is this sort of willingness to turn a blind eye towards terrorism as long as it's not directed towards American interests.
That is true because of it goes against American interests that you want to fight terror and you want to support such kind of elements. Now, there is one question which comes there. about the Eastern Bloc, which we spoke about MUKUS, we spoke about AUKUS, we talked about FAUKUS, and we talked about all these different groupings. But what about the Eastern European Bloc, which used to be very powerful before? Do they have any say now? It used to be like the border protector for Europe,
Mm, the Visegrad group.
the
So
Visegrad group. That's right.
yeah, so
I,
that's
that term is not
Poland,
remembered yet.
Hungary,
Hungary,
the Czech Republic,
Austria.
Slovakia, and no, not Austria. And who else?
Earlier Yugoslavia was also part of that.
No, no. And one more. There's 5 countries in the Visegrad group. But anyway, they initially were shit scared of Trump because they thought that they would be thrown. Well, some of them, Hungary and the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic don't have problems, but Poland has severe problems with Russia. So Poland was particularly worried. Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia were particularly worried that they'd get thrown under the bus because they used to run the agenda under Obama. Run the agenda, I won't say, but either they ran Obama's agenda or Obama ran their agenda. I don't know what, but it was mutually very convenient when it came to Russia. That stopped under Trump. So in many ways, what Poland had to do, and Poland did a very good balancing act, was that it decided to raise up its defenses and say, hey, look, we're buying American equipment. We're contributing our required amount to national security. We're not like other European countries that are underspending on defense, but still getting the benefits of NATO. So they played that game. Right now, I think they're much more worried about what Belarus is doing. Because remember, first of all, most of these countries supported regime change in Syria and Iraq and all those places. And now those same refugees are across the border in Belarus. Then they tried to support regime change in Belarus during the elections last year, or I think it was this year. And now Belarus is like having its own sweet revenge. It's just pushing them. It's saying, you want to go to Europe? Come to Belarus. Just come. Don't worry. And the moment they come into Belarus, they're all taken to the Polish border and things like that and pushed across the border. So that's now become the main problem. So I think Poland is much more focused on that. The others, because they don't have a real border with Russia, seem to take things a lot lighter. So, for example, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovak Republic, you just won't find the kind of anti-Russian sentiment out there that you would in Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Yeah.
See, the Japan and the Eastern Bloc, I have always said in my first book also I wrote that it's time for Dharma Commonwealth kind of an idea, where all the ex-Dharma following countries unite together on a political and military landscape to protect themselves from further colonization, how the Europe has exploited them. What is your view on that?
Sorry, could you repeat? I didn't get the question.
Like the Dharma-based foundation countries, like for example, Eastern Asian countries who have some connection with Dharma-based civilizations, like Indian civilization, and like all those countries come together to fight with or protect their own interests because they all people look
so
alike.
In my experience, Dharma-based countries are the most adharmic you can ever find. Okay, I don't know if they use Dharma as a cover for all their rottenness and crookedry and corruption inside. But you look at China, for example, they were absolutely brutal with their own people. I mean, the communists are just the last iteration in a whole set of dynasties that were extraordinarily brutal with their own people. The Japanese, you look at the extent of Japanese war crimes. The swords which that unit, what was it, Unit 731 or whatever, that used to carry out all the testing, their swords used to have Buddha inscribed on them, and they used to carry out executions with swords with Buddha inscribed on them and things like that. You look at India, we may not have so much large-scale violence, but there's persistent low-level violence that actually ends up claiming a lot more lives than a few instances of large-scale violence do. So this dharmic unity is just humbug. It's never worked in the last 5,000 years. It's never going to work now.
There is a new act introduced in the US Congress. It's called HR 5746. It's a right to vote. And the right to vote, you will be surprised that even the undocumented people can vote in state of California today. And it's going to centralize the elections, just like India has a central election commission. It's going to set up. Earlier, the US elections were run by the states till last time. Now, this act, which I think will pass, will federalize the US elections and might copy Indian model of election monitoring. What do you think it is? Is it good for US or is it bad for the democracy of the US?
Undocumented, look, I can't believe you can give undocumented people the right to vote. Because the right to choose the government rests with the citizens of a country. It can't be given to non-citizens of the country, number one. On the other hand, the centralization of elections would do a fantastic job. Right now, there's just too much skullduggery happening with the voting pattern, with voting in general out there. Does it make it much more prone to institutional capture? Well, yes, it does. But there's also much greater oversight at that point. You have a uniform set of rules. You can't just go around doing whatever the hell you want to do, wherever you want to do it. So generally, centralization of the voting system, very good. Giving the vote to undocumented people, no chance.
No, and
but look, America is destroying itself. Congratulations, go ahead. Under normal circumstances, I'd be very scared for America, because being a great well-wisher of America, I don't want to see America destroy itself, but it is. So normally I would be panicked about it, because if America falls, then China is the default great power. The good thing, of course, is China is also destroying itself. So, go ahead, destroy yourselves. Like, I'm just waiting and watching. So, the way I see it, the historical parallel is Rome and Persia. So for 1,000 years, these guys were at each other's throats, right? So starting, I think the first Roman-Persian campaign was under Crassus during the triumvirate of Julius Caesar. And since then, for 700 years after that, Rome and Persia have literally been at each other's throats in different iterations, as Rome, then as Byzantium, first as the unified Roman Empire, then as the Eastern Roman Empire, then as the Byzantine Empire, and Persia as the Parthian, the Arsacid Empire, and then the Sassanid Empire. But it didn't matter. They were constantly at each other's throats. Dynasties may change, but the rivalry remained the same. And guess what? All of a sudden in 600 odd AD, 650, 660, something like that, I forget the exact date, but 600 something AD, the Arabs come out of nowhere and they go about and destroy both Persia and the Byzantine Empire. And I'm like, yay! So I'm kind of waiting to see. So the way I see it today is that America is Rome and China is Persia, and they're probably both going to go down, and some new power like the Arabs is going to rise up from somewhere and screw both of them over. Yay!
The funny thing is that the Americans don't even know. The CNN, if you look at CNN.com or even you see FoxNews.com, no real reporting. And the private channels like Epoch and Breitbart and all those things are considered extreme right position, church-based positions. Now, so church and the left, which is,
I don't think they're church-based positions, but I just find it really funny that when Fox News first came on the market, I used to see all these channels like MSNBC, CNN, and all these people make fun of Fox. Today, they've all become mirror images of Fox. They've in fact become a lot worse than Fox, right? Like before, look, I was always taught, I was old school. I was always taught that there's news and there's opinion. Opinion is classified differently. News is news. It's facts. Opinion is put in a separate thing. Today, you land on CNN's landing page. It's meant to have different editions, right? The international edition, the US domestic edition. That distinction's been blurred. I don't want to watch American politics on CNN, but I'm forced American politics, and I keep checking, is it the international edition? Yes. And it's all these opinions, analysis. The first 10 things will be opinion analysis. I'm like, where's the news? What's happening in the world? There's nothing. It's become the same with the BBC as well. But of course, the BBC is British. But, so it's just one of those things. It's once faith in institutions goes, that's the end of the country.
True.
Okay, in one way or another, it's the end of the country.
Absolutely true. And
it's quite curious that in spite of our absolutely shitty institutions in India, there is still a significant level of trust, maybe out of sheer desperation in institutions. But in America, that's just been completely destroyed.
The problem with in India is that the politicians don't respect the institutions. Many politicians, most of them, on either of the aisles of the Indian politics. But still, the people have trust in the institutions. People value institutions, and that is the thing which drives. In the US, people have lost trust in the institutions. Look at the think tanks. Washington D.C. is think tank. You have said a lot on them.
Yeah, but look, it's not just think tanks, right? It's think tanks, it's institutions in general that have been lying. Look at the public health services. Look at Fauci and people like that. The sheer number of U-turns that these people have done. Okay. I can still go to the WHO's website and still open Dr. Ted's tweet from 2 years back saying, please do not wear masks, it endangers. Okay. And then you can still go check it out. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, I forget, Emperor Rastafari, whatever. But you go there and check it out. I just call him Dr. Ted. It's still there on his Twitter timeline. Okay. You look at the number of U-turns that have happened in public health. Left, right, and center. It's not funny. Okay. You look at the way the US elections were held. The Democrats would have lost faith in the Trump election. The Republicans would have lost faith in the Biden election. Either way, both have lost faith in the system. Okay. And next election, depending on who wins, 50% of the population is going to say it was an unfair election. Now, for me, that in India, nobody takes those accusations. You'll have 5-6 people here say elections are unfair, but overall, everybody accepts the result of an election. In America, people aren't willing to do that. And when you have such deep divisions, you're almost certainly leading up to either splitting or civil. At any rate, it's one form or the other of the collapse of a country.
Now, we touched upon all the countries, and I have a lot of African friends today and South American friends today also in the show. And they would say that Africa has been never led any alliance against any other country. And we know that Africa was colonized heavily by everybody. And South America, South America is a worst case scenario. The languages have been wiped out. The traditional languages have been wiped out. Now they
not
speak
entirely. You still speak. I mean, in Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador, they still speak Quechua and Aymara.
Small,
and
Mapuche tribes, small, very small.
True. I mean, mostly it's Spanish or Portuguese, but the native languages still live on. You still have some Nahua speakers. You have Maya speakers in Mexico.
0.05% of the population. 0.05.
Yeah.
But we can always say that 99.95% has been wiped out. 99.5.
Yeah.
If you go to Brazil museums, you'll be shocked that they show that before 1515, there was no history of Brazil. That's what they teach. There's no records.
Well, there's no that's the problem. There is no records. History is only if you record it. If you don't record it, it's not history.
No, but it doesn't mean that humanity didn't exist over there.
But that doesn't matter. If you do not have a record of yourself in some form, written or architectural or some kind of artifacts, you simply don't exist. That, unfortunately, that's why it's called prehistory. Before writing, it's called prehistory, where you're pieced together from the archaeological record, but not from a language. History starts with writing.
Yeah.
So, they're not wrong. Historiographically speaking, academically, they're not incorrect.
What I would like to encourage, because most of these people, my friends, have joined from there, that they should start the attempts to write the prehistory also. They should write their languages, write down.
So I think there's a huge, I think especially in places like Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. Chile, they defeated and stood out against the Spanish conquistadors for the longest period of time.
Longest period of time. Mapuches.
Yeah, the Mapuche. And the history of that is extremely well known. The history of the fall of the Inca Empire is extremely well known. I think the history of exploitation of the native Aymara population of Bolivia is extremely well known. Mostly recorded, curiously enough, by the Spanish and by local oral tradition as well, somewhat. The history of the fall of the Mexican tribes, one after the other, is also, reasonably well documented, and there is historical memory. With the Maya, that historical memory isn't all that much, because there is no historical memory of the fall of the Maya, of all the cities, and then the Maya Confederacy under Mayapan, which was the last one. I think the Mayas held out longer than anybody else ultimately against the Spanish, which shows you the cultural depth that they had. But to date, nobody really knows what happened with Copan or Uxmal or Tikal or places like that. There is the written record, the Mayan hieroglyphs and things, but nobody realistically. We know there were war bands, and there were Teotihuacan came and captured large parts of Maya territory and created its own cultural imprint out there and things like that. But again, a lot of it is a mixture of prehistory with history. So I'm not surprised at what that Brazilian museum put up. It's not entire. People may not like it. See, I think we have to separate from what is accurate from things we don't like. Sometimes things we don't like can be accurate. That's right. And unfortunately, in the case of Brazil, I haven't seen anything particularly historical in terms of stone or writing or artifacts to suggest that there was anything other than prehistory before colonization.
No, one of the problems with the South American, and you pointed out many things, and I have been working with them, and during my last book research also, Glory in God, I have worked with them very, very much, is that the governments in South America don't want to promote it. They get the money from United Nations actually, but they don't put it in their communities over there. And their tax revenues are very low. They're very poor, most of them. Yes, go ahead. You say.
Look, I think it's a general rule that Chile has always been the most well-managed South American country. And the other countries generally tend to be quite, sorry to use the word, but either a comedy or a farce. Right. I think with Argentina, you can generally say its history has been something of a comedy, that it keeps electing demagogues who keep screwing it over, be it Peron or Mrs. Kirchner or whatever. Or with Peru, where they keep voting in, honestly, losers. Like, who the hell would vote in Alan Garcia back after he destroyed your economy once upon a time? But, they did. So, it's just generally things. I think historically, people may not like this, but Pinochet did, in a sense, stabilize Chile as well. People will hate me. I think you're going to get a lot of hate mail after this, but nasty character. But guess what? Sometimes nasty characters also do good things, just like good people sometimes do very nasty things. So, it is what it is.
I call most of my South American friends as the lost Hindus, because of Valmiki Ramayana connection and the ancient Mapuche tribe. I've lived with them, so I have good idea of what they are. And so somewhere on the line, they're like us many times. They're like as emotional as us. They're as, once you have a friend, then is a friend for life. That kind of culture.
Yeah, but they're still much better managed than we are. For all their faults, they're still much better managed than India is.
So Abhijit has very good points for you. So okay, be friends with us. The last is the African. A lot of African friends have joined, and the biggest crisis in USA is the African identity. So the Afro-American identity now is being questioned by many Africans because they think their culture from where they came from Africa, the new generation wants to go back to the culture which they find it better than the church-based culture. So what do you have to say on these people
I
that
don't think it's a church-based culture, but I would really urge you to show me one place in Africa today that is doing better than America. Okay, except say Botswana, Seychelles, and Mauritius. And Seychelles and Mauritius are islands. If your ancestry is from Botswana, sure, Botswana is probably doing better. But tell me one place there that was doing better before. And I'm a bit sick of this nonsense that it was white imperialism that destroyed sub-Saharan Africa. Just like it wasn't white imperialism that destroyed India. We destroyed ourselves. Even before, from what we can piece together of, say, Ghanaian history, the history of Mali, the history of the Zulus in southern Africa and things like that, they were not peaceful societies. They were extraordinarily violent societies. Where is the profit in denying that? I find it very disturbing when people think that it's not very different from ISIS in that sense. ISIS thinks of this imagined past under the 4 Rashidun caliphs where everything was hunky-dory and it was a land of milk and honey. And, Indians have the same concept about Ram Rajya, that under Rama, everything was hunky-dory and, there was gold flowing from trees and the birds were singing Mozart and old people were farting Beethoven. Nobody farted in Ram Rajya, when people had flatulence, it used to fart out the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven from their ass. So there's this whole thing, and you find this with African culture as well, that Afro-American culture, that it's probably reached a stage of ossification where there's this kind of imagined utopian Africa, which historically speaking simply did not exist. You look at pre-contact, at least with Africa, you can say there was constant contact of some kind of that. With the Americas, there was no contact. And yet you look at empires that died out long before the white man even came, Cahokia or the Moche or Teotihuacan and things like that. They're extraordinarily violent cultures. India was never a peaceful place. India was an extraordinarily violent place. If anything, the British coming actually calmed down the violence somewhat. Right. So I'm sorry, I just don't buy this crap.
So Abhijit, last question is Africa, South America. We covered the whole globe today. Now, Japan was actually, I would say before that, Marthanda Varma from Kerala in 1741, he's the first ruler outside the Europe to give a direct crushing defeat to the Dutch. It's a recorded history, and it's a history which has been verified.
It isn't the first time. There was Kanoji Angre who inflicted a lot of defeats. There was we have instances where the Chora fleet actually defeated a Roman fleet. So no, it isn't the first instance.
Glad. Like at least in the colonial powers, the Dutch were the first ones who got defeated straight, and they were the worst of all the colonial powers. People who have seen the Dutch atrocities in Africa and other places, Spanish and Portuguese will a little bit be.
To be honest, I think the Spanish and Portuguese were a lot worse. I think the Dutch are forever tainted by that one big massacre, which they didn't commit themselves, incidentally. They got samurais. They rented samurais from Japan to come and kill off the entire population of the Spice Islands in Indonesia. But I forget where they are, in Sulawesi or
Sulawesi, yes,
Java. I
that's right.
don't know.
Sulawesi.
One of those islands.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Dutch were the worst of the lot. I think the Portuguese and the Spanish were far, far worse than any of them.
And the Dutch East India Company, which was the biggest company before the English East India Company, and it was a private corporation. They are the ones who bought the maximum goods from the Mughal Empire from the Kolkata port. That's where they used to ship out from. Jahangir. Jahangir was their pet. We would say that he would supply them women and clothes. That's how they used to cleanse the deals. So before we end the show today, Abhijit, what do you see is the future of Japan, India creating a military alliance?
Zero. Less than zero. There is no military intercompatibility. There's no cultural compatibility. Zilch.
Well, cultural compatibility is a lot because
not really. We think it is, but theoretically it is. So theoretically, Persian, German, and Sanskrit belong to one language family. But if I start speaking Sanskrit to a German or Sanskrit to an Iranian, they look at me as if I had a stroke or something like that. So theoretically, we have a lot of cultural similarity. In reality, we have zilch.
Thank you so much, Abhijit, and thank you for all the viewers for watching, and thank you for all my friends from South America as well as from Africa joining today also. And I will thank University of Nigeria for accommodating that. Thank you. Namaste.